Today's video, we're going to talk about developing good time. What exactly does that mean when we're talking about good time? How do you do that? How do you get better at playing it? That's all coming up. Welcome to Learn About Music. My name's Todd, and if you're the first time here, glad you're here. This is a channel for mere mortals. In other words, people who are not just naturally gifted as playing amazing and have it all going for them. This is a place where you can learn about music, some of the things that are on the periphery, and also about some fundamental skills that you can learn about playing music. And so I really appreciate you being here today. Today we're going to talk about developing good time. Some people think that they have pretty good time, but yet when you listen to them, you're like, man, their time is all over the place. They speed up, they slow down, yuck. It doesn't sound good. And the long and short of it is, if you have time that fluctuates faster and slower, you're going to have people who are not going to want to play with you. It really is essential to you becoming a better player. So let's get started on what that means. Now, when we talk about playing in time, what we're talking about is that if there was a constant click that was going on, in this instance I have a metronome that is clicking, and we take this, the time between each beat, we can talk about dividing the beat. And what I mean is that right where the downbeat is, where the click happens, you can think about the front end of that beat, you can think about the center of that beat, and you can talk about just around the back of the beat. Now, this is a little more advanced idea, but I wanted to introduce it early because sometimes people get afraid that they're going to be late, so they always play on the front of the beat. And in doing so, when they play on the front of the beat, they sound almost like they're rushing. Now, they may not be. They're just right on the front edge of that beat, and it feels just like a little bit too fast. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm just going to go ahead and play on the front of the beat here with the click, and I'm going to play right on the front of the beat, okay? And you can kind of tell that I'm sort of rushing it just a little bit. I'll try it once more time. And at this point, for me, it's a little bit hard to do that. And there's a time and a place when you would want to do that. In the same regard, if I play right in the center of the beat, it feels slightly different. So it's right in the center of the beat. Then I can also play on the back of the beat, which is something that is very preferred in some scenarios. And that sounds like this. Here we go. And this is mostly when I'm playing time with other people. On the verge of just being almost slow, almost dragging. Sometimes when I'm playing with a drummer, to propel the beat or the groove, I'll lay on the back of the beat just so that it starts to make the groove feel stronger here. And that brings up another point about playing time, and that's what's called playing in the pocket. Now the pocket, and you'll hear people say that, they'll say, come on man, just get in the pocket. The pocket is actually a term that's used so that when you play, you're playing in time, the beat or style of the pattern you're playing, with the other musicians on stage, and you're locked in together. And it feels like that you guys are almost one person, one mind playing that groove together. So playing in that pocket is when you are locked in. And one thing that people don't understand is sometimes when you're playing in a band and you're playing that way, the time actually may fluctuate, speed up and slow down slightly. But as long as you're doing it together, it doesn't feel wrong. It doesn't feel like you're playing out of time because the band is doing it together collectively to make it feel cool. But in getting there and being able to play in the pocket, it's important that you learn to play nice, steady time so that when the metronome is turned off, that in that instance you play relatively steady most of the time here. I knew a drummer named Steve Ivy who was a drummer at college where I went to, at the University of Northern Colorado. Steve Ivy was the top big band drummer there at the school. And on the weekends, I would go to the music building to go to one of the practice rooms, and I would go and sit in for a couple, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours to play. And I always noticed that on a regular basis, I would come in and I could hear in one of the bigger rooms, Steve Ivy would be set up and he would be playing. He'd be practicing, and he'd be playing a simple swing figure on his ride. So he'd be playing ting, 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 ting. And he would play that for hours on end with a click in his ear. And he did that so that he could grind it into his soul, basically, that he'd done it so many times and for such long periods of time. At any tempo, he'd be able to go ahead and keep that time pretty steady. And that was part of his process of developing to become a much better musician. Now, as I mentioned, he was playing with a metronome. There's times when I have run into people and they're resistant to playing with a metronome. When you're first starting to play with a metronome, it can be hard. Maybe you haven't learned the specific patterns or the difficult part of the piece of music that you're learning to play. So you're like, well, the metronome just throws me off and it makes me crazy and I don't want to play with it. Well, that's just dumb. Because a metronome is going to take you, especially if you set a metronome at a lower speed and learn the lick nice and slow, it's going to learn how to play those more difficult passages of music, learning to play those better at increasing tempos, and a metronome is the tool you would use to do that. So I've often played with some drummers who get really hostile about working with a metronome or playing with a click track. They're like, oh, I'm the drummer and playing with a track. It takes all the soul out of what I'm playing. Well, I got news for you, dude. As a person who plays within a band and I have to play with a drummer, I'm dependent on you setting the time. And so if your time isn't steady, it makes it harder for me. So the fact that you're saying you're not willing to follow a steady piece of time, that's garbage. You're a fraud if you don't learn to play good, steady time. That doesn't mean you have to all the time, but if you're not working with one, that means you don't have a good sense of time. And again, people are not going to want to play with you over a long period of time. Now, I mean, metronomes are cheap. You can actually get an app right off of your phone. I have one on here. You can see it here on the screen now. They're very simple, and you can get them from very simple to more complex. And you can vary the tempo, and you can learn to play with them. And how do you learn to play and start to develop better time? Again, as I mentioned here a minute ago, you're going to want to go ahead and play in multiple types of feeling. I'm going to talk now specifically about being a bass player. I may want to learn to play simple rhythms with the metronome initially, and then I want to make some of those rhythms more complex, and I want to play them at various tempos. So I would start at 60 beats per minute, and I would play something simple like quarter notes. Can I play with the click at 60 beats per minute? Okay. Then could I go to eighth notes and make it work? Keep that steady. Then I go to triplets. Then I go to 16th notes. Then maybe to sextuplets. And also along with that, I might want to accent the first beat so that I could do that. So again, I did that without a metronome, and I might have slowed down a little bit as I went on. So let's just check and see where I was at here. We're going to set this to 60 clicks a minute. Let's see if you can actually hear it. That's at 60, so I was probably going at 70 or 80. Let's pick it up to, well, let's try 82. There's 80. All right, so if I'm playing this, I'm going to play the quarters. And I'm trying to be right on the center of the beat as I go. Into eighth notes. Triplets. I was a little behind as I switched. Then 16ths coming up. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. Now let's try sextuplets. Maybe a little bit behind. Probably could use a little work on that. But the point being is that if you use a metronome and you use it in different styles, you're going to learn to actually be able to play in time with anybody. And that's a good thing. It's not something to be resistant about. And then instead of doing that, maybe you want to play with a drum machine and practice and see how that feels. So if I go ahead and start a drum machine, then I would try to learn to play some simple rhythms along with the drum machine and see if I could groove with it. Let's give it a try. Eighth notes. Trying to lay back. And then maybe I go to triplets. Back to it. And I try different things rhythmically to see if I can capture it, make it make sense. Yeah, that's it. So I've just given you some basic, simple things to do to start to learn to play time. But the biggest piece of it is that you've got to go ahead and examine what you're able to do and what you're not able to do, and then make working with a metronome part of your diet. Part of how you work to become a better player. You want to be in better bands, you want to play in better situations, you got to be able to play slow tempos, medium tempos, and fast tempos here. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. Question of the day: have you worked with a metronome? And what was the hardest thing about starting to play with a metronome? Appreciate you being here today. Again, this is a new channel, and if you liked what you saw today, I'd appreciate you to go ahead and hit the like button. And also, if you want to see more of this type of content coming, please let me know in the comments. I always appreciate hearing from you and knowing what you want to see as part of the Learn About Music series. And again, my name is Todd, 6'5", 220, cut like a piece of granite. We look forward to seeing you next time.